Live from Augustana College, this is WAG FM Radioactive. I am your host, Joe McCoy, and you are listening to the JoeDaBears Football Show. Today we will be discussing the AFC and NFC Championship games this weekend. It was a very entertaining championship weekend with, I believe, the two most deserving teams going to the Super Bowl, and that being the San Francisco 49ers, who were the number one seed out of the NFC, and the Kansas City Chiefs, who were the number 3 seed out of the AFC. But if the Baltimore Ravens, the number 2 seed out of the AFC, but if the Baltimore Ravens did not make it to the Super Bowl out of the AFC, I think the next best team was the Chiefs, and they proved that on Sunday, defeating the Tennessee Titans. So, two very entertaining games. The 49ers versus the Packers was kind of more of a blowout. So, for me being a diehard Bears fan, it was awesome to see the Packers get blown out. I think that the Packers were one of the most, I don't want to say overhyped because they weren't really hyped, but undeserving second seed teams. They went 13-3 in the regular season. It felt like every game they should have lost twice to the Lions. They could have lost to the Giants. They honestly should have lost to us week 1. It felt like there was just a million games that they probably should have lost and somehow ended up winning and getting the second seed in the NFC. But they were kind of exposed on Sunday. Their defense was exposed for not being as good as everyone was kind of saying it was. They didn't have a run defense at all. Their secondary wasn't really there. And I think it showed that the Green Bay Packers were not as good as a team as their 13-3 record showed. So moving on to the first game, we're going to talk about the AFC game. We had the Kansas City Chiefs defeating the Titans 35-24 in Arrowhead. This actually was a pretty entertaining game for the first 3 quarters. It was pretty close. The Chiefs kind of ran away with it in the end in the fourth quarter, but the Titans came out in this game and did exactly the game plan they needed to do. They controlled the clock. They got out to a lead. They started this game on a 10-0 lead. Their first possession, they got a field goal. Then they were able to stop the Kansas City Chiefs. They had a long drive, which was capped off by a rushing touchdown by Derrick Henry, and it kind of felt like, oh, here we go again. The Titans are going to get this lead. They're going to be able to stop the opposing team's offense, and all of a sudden, the Titans could be in the Super Bowl. But their offense was not enough to keep up with the Chiefs' offense in this game. Once Patrick Mahomes got going, there was no stopping him, and the Kansas City Chiefs ultimately prevailed. So Ryan Tannehill in this game was 21 for 31 for 209 yards with 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. So Tannehill definitely threw the ball more than the Titans were hoping he was going to today. We saw that their formula for success in the previous 2 playoff games was just pound the rock with Derrick Henry. And in those previous 2 games against the Patriots and the Baltimore Ravens, Ryan Tannehill only threw the ball for a combined 29 times for 160 yards. So in this game alone, he threw the ball 2 times more and for about 50 more passing yards. So he definitely was throwing the ball more than the Titans would have hoped for. You know, when Ryan Tannehill is throwing the ball over 30 times, that means the Tennessee Titans are losing. They're having to come back. And that means Derrick Henry is not being as effective as they want him to be. So the Chiefs' offense simply overpowered the Titans' defense, who cannot get off the field on third and down. The Titans' defense could not contain Mahomes in the pocket whatsoever. In their first meeting, Mahomes it was his first game back from his knee injury that he hurt on the QB sneak. So the Titans didn't really have to worry about Mahomes rushing the ball, but they kind of forgot that, the dude's pretty athletic, he's pretty mobile, so they had no contain for him in the pocket, and whenever they did cover the receivers, they had tight coverage, which was pretty rarely. Mahomes would just scramble and get yards down the field. So the Chiefs were 6-10 on third down and were also 1 for 1 on fourth down, with the Tennessee Titans only being 3rd and 10 on third down. So, that's a key difference in this game, and that was exactly what was flipped for the Titans in the last game. The Titans were so proficient on third down, but in this game, the Chiefs, over 60% percentage on third down. The Titans defense was just simply not able to get off the field, and when you allow the Chiefs to extend drives, you basically have no chance of stopping them. Tennessee controlled the ball in the first quarter and a half pretty well, but as I said, they got out to that 10-0 lead. Then the lead was 17-7, but the Chiefs ended up being ahead 21-17 and a half, and the Titans were never able to regain control of this game. The Chiefs scored a touchdown in the final 10 seconds with a crazy run by Patrick Mahomes. It also was absolutely terrible tackling by the Tennessee Titans. It kind of looked like they were hesitant to hit him really hard, and I know I don't want to make that excuse that, they were scared to hit him, but I really think that is in the back of players' minds now, especially with Mahomes. He's a superstar quarterback. He's more likely to get that foul call. So it kind of looked like the Titans defenders were a little nervous to really try to hit him as hard as they wanted to, and they ended up being slower. Mahomes made a couple of guys miss, and he got into the end zone for the touchdown. So they scored there. Then they got the ball to start the second half, and the Titans were never able to get the lead again. The Chiefs defense really did a great job holding Derrick Henry. He only rushed for 69 yards on 19 carries, and he did have that one rushing touchdown that I mentioned. So the Chiefs defense was finally able to stop Derrick Henry, who was on a running rampage in these past 3 games. He had over 350 yards in the past 2 playoff games combined. It was an absolutely insane playoff performance by Derrick Henry. It sucks that it kind of had to end on a poor note with only 3.4 yards per carry, but it's still an amazing season by Derrick Henry. He was the rushing king. I believe he had over 1,500 yards or 1,600 yards. So it was an absolutely amazing season by Derrick Henry. His postseason performance we'll talk about for many years to come, but he was just not able to overpower this Chiefs defense. And as I said already, once the Titans got down and they had to play catch-up ball, they weren't able to run the ball as much as they wanted to. Derrick Henry only got 3 carries in the second half, which is nowhere close to enough. He should be at least probably 13. So they weren't able to get the run game going, and there was no way the Tennessee Titans were going to beat the Chiefs if this game came down to the quarterbacks. The Tennessee Titans they're kind of built to win football games in one way, and that is by getting out to a lead, which they were able to accomplish in that game by going up 10-0. And then they just run the ball and kill clock and control time and just wear your defense down. But with how powerful the Chiefs offense was, they weren't able to stop the Chiefs offense like they were the other offenses that they faced with the Patriots and the Ravens. And the Chiefs defense, they basically just stacked the box the entire game. They are playing 7-man fronts, 8-man fronts, and one time in the second quarter, it was a 3rd and 1, and they came out in goal line defense. It was It was kind of what I was saying they were going to have to do. Let Ryan Tannehill beat you. If you lose to the Tennessee Titans because Ryan Tannehill put up 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, tip your cap. Great game by Ryan Tannehill. But the Chiefs were not going to allow Derrick Henry to beat them. They stacked the box. They brought the linebackers up, which the Titans were effectively working to their advantage. They did a lot of play action in the beginning because the linebackers were up, so they ran some over-the-middle slants and crossers, but it wasn't effective enough to work all game. And once the Chiefs shut down the running game, there was no hope for the Titans. Patrick Mahomes in this game was 23 for 35 for 295 yards and 3 touchdowns. It was another great performance by Mahomes. He was absolutely lights out in this game. Super efficient down the field, super efficient with his legs. And, he's arguably the best quarterback in the league right now. So the Titans, again, they failed to account for Mahomes' running game. He was the leading rusher for the Kansas City Chiefs with 56 yards on 6 carries, and he had that amazing scamper for a touchdown, as I mentioned. The matchups that the Kansas City's offense creates is it's almost unstoppable to cover because they have Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Sammy Watkins is their 3rd receiver, which is insane. The dude was drafted 4th overall in the 2014 draft, I believe. So to have a guy like Sammy Watkins be your third target, it's just pretty insane. And for defenses, you really have to pick between Hill and Kelce on who you wanna double, because if you double Hill, you have to double him underneath and over the top because of how fast he is. And if you double Kelce, you basically just have to put 2 guys on him to kind of control him because of how big he is. But then you have Hill one-on-one, and no cornerback in the league can cover Tyreek Hill one-on-one due to how fast he is. So their offense just creates a million matchup problems. And again, even if you're able to slow down Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, you still have a very good receiver in Sammy Watkins, who's gone to the Pro Bowl multiple years. And it's like, so what do you do with him now? And it's just amazing the weapons that this Kansas City offense has. Sammy Watkins actually had the most targets in this game with 10, and he caught his first touchdown pass since week 1, which came against the Jaguars when he caught 3 touchdown passes in that game. So Watkins had a 40-yard touchdown bomb in this game that made the score 35-17, and it all but ended the game. It was a beautiful pass by Patrick Mahomes, but what happened was Watkins and the defender kind of got tangled within the 10-yard mark of the line of scrimmage. The defender ended up falling down, and there was no one over the top to cover Watkins. So he was pretty wide open, but Mahomes still made the pass, and that was basically the dagger in this game. The Chiefs defense has really played very solid the second half of the season, and they are ranked 7th in the league in points allowed, only giving up 19.2 points a game. And ever since the Week 10 loss to the Titans, the most their defense gave up in the regular season was 21 points in Week 17 to the Chargers. So, in those final 7 games, the Chiefs defense really stuck together. They really held up strong, and we've seen their defense throughout the playoffs how effective they've been able to be. And even last week in the divisional round against the Texans, I know technically the Texans went up 24-0, but as I stated last week, 14 of those points were basically off of special teams. One came off directly on a punt block for a touchdown, and the other one, Tyreek Hill fumbled a punt within the 5-yard line. So there was nothing that the Chiefs defense could have done in that situation. And after the first 17 minutes of the game, the Chiefs defense only gave up on one more touchdown throughout the entire rest of the game. So in the last 43 minutes, they only gave up 7 points, and they just let the Chiefs offense carry them to victory. So the Chiefs defense is really playing well right now. They've picked the best time to play their best football, and we're seeing that it's really helping them get to the Super Bowl. I know all we talk about is how explosive their offense is, and how great Patrick Mahomes is, and Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce, and Watkins, but what people really aren't talking about is that this defense has really gotten better throughout the season, and it's really helped get their offense back on the field so they can have more drives and really keep the momentum going for their team. One thing that really surprised me that I know a ton of analysts are criticizing the Titans for, as I'm about to as well, but the Titans' defensive scheme really just made no sense throughout the entire game. Almost all the time they were doing a 3-man rush, why they thought that was going to work against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense, I have no idea. There's no way you can stop this Chiefs offense by only rushing 3 and letting Mahomes stand in the pocket for 6, 7, 8 seconds. Eventually, some guy's gonna get open, and it's probably not even gonna be on their route. They're gonna run their route. Let's say you have them covered. Then it's just street ball. Tyreek Hill's gonna come blazing back to the ball. Mahomes will hit him for an easy 15-yard completion, and it's a first down. So I have no idea why the Titans didn't bring pressure. They should have brought pressure on 40% of the plays. I mean, they should have had pressure on Mahomes all game. If you get beat deep, so be it. That's, yes, it's almost impossible to guard Tyreek Hill one-on-one, but you got to bring pressure on Mahomes and make him get rid of that ball in the first 2 to 3 seconds, because if you allow him to hold on to it, there's no way you're going to be able to guard those receivers for 6, 7 seconds, and he's just going to pick you apart down the field. The Titans were also playing zone coverage, which I'm fine with because it's so hard to play man against these guys. But the zone defense that they were playing, it felt so loose. And, Hill or Watkins, they would run a little crow route, and they would just sit there, and they'd be sitting there, and the defenders wouldn't even kind of close in on them. Like, they see the guy run his crow route, sit there in the middle of the zone, and then they just kind of stand there and wait for Mahomes to throw it, and then they come up and make the tackle. It kind of just made no sense to me of why they were allowing them to sit in the zone so easily. I don't know why they didn't come up and try to disrupt the pass, but the whole scheme just did not seem to work at all. They didn't bring pressure, which was an awful idea. Then they just kind of sat back in loose coverage, and it didn't work at all because their defense allowed 35 points. So it was not a great defensive scheme at all. The 49ers in the Super Bowl are going to have to bring pressure, and the thing about the 49ers that is so great is they can get pressure with a 4-man front on almost half the plays. So they can not blitz and also play really good coverage and still get pressure because of how good their front 4 is with Solomon Thomas, Nick Bosa, D Ford. So they're going to be able to play a lot of coverage but also still get pressure. Now, going over some of the team stats in this game, the Chiefs outrushed the Titans 112 yards to 85. So that is definitely the biggest shocker. If someone would have said that the Chiefs were going to outrun the Titans in this game, I would have said you're out of your mind. All the Chiefs are going to do is just throw the ball down the field, and Derrick Henry's just going to rush for over 150 yards again. But it was the complete opposite. The Chiefs outrushed the Titans, and Andy Reid really had great play calling in this game. And he deserves a ton of credit because he realized that the Titans were just rushing 3 guys and dropping 8. So he was like, okay, if you're going to drop everyone into coverage, I'm just going to run the ball right at you, get 7-8 yards of carry, and make you play the run. And then the second you do that, I'm throwing the ball over the top with Patrick Mahomes. So Andy Reid really did a great job of just taking what the Titans defense was giving them. He felt no need to pass the ball when they were rushing the ball so effectively with Williams. There was no reason to have Mahomes throw the ball 50 times because they were getting 7-8 yards a rush. Kansas City had 110 more total yards, so we saw that their offense was a lot more effective. And there also was no turnovers in this game, so it was a pretty well-clean game. The Chiefs were going to have to do that if they want to stay in this game. They knew that if they had two turnovers like they did in the last game against the Texans, one with the pump block and with the muff punt by Tyreek Hill, they were really going to put themselves in the hole. So they knew they had to play a clean game, and they did. They had a couple of penalties that they're definitely going to have to clean up. They had 2 encroachment penalties on back-to-back plays in the first quarter. So definitely going to be a point of emphasis for them is to clean up those penalties, but no turnovers, and that's really what allowed them to sustain and keep the lead in the game. So now moving on to the NFC game, we had the 49ers beating the Packers 37-20, and what was almost an exact replica of the first time these teams met on Sunday Night Football. And the 49ers just had a total domination in their running offense, rushing for 285 yards, which is an insane number. I was watching this game, and I texted my dad. I said, I have never seen a team run the ball as effectively as the 49ers did in this game. I know we've all been talking about Derrick Henry in the postseason, how well he's rushed, but this rushing attack was better than what Derrick Henry has been doing. Raheem Mostert set a franchise record with 220 rushing yards on 29 carries, which is a 7.6 yards per carry average, and he also rushed for 4 touchdowns. Those are just insane numbers, and this guy Raheem Mostert, he came out of Purdue. He was a track guy at Purdue, and you can kind of see when he runs very track guy like. So he's a speedster. He's not a big guy. He's under 200 pounds. He's like 5'10". He's pretty short, but he's got the speed, and he was cut by 7 other NFL teams, including the Bears, before he came to San Francisco. And this was definitely his coming out party. This was his moment. I'm super happy that he was able to do it on such a big stage, but rushing for 220 yards in the NFC Championship game is just an amazing accomplishment. And 9 of his runs, he got above 15 miles per hour, which is pretty crazy because you have to run at least like 15, 20 yards to hit that speed. And that just kind of shows how big the holes were that he had to run through that the San Francisco offensive line was creating. The Packers were not even getting a touch on Mostert in this game, whether they were doing pitch plays, sweeps, even sometimes they'd run it up the middle, and he'd have a hole that was 4 feet wide where he just rushed it for 15, 20 yards and got a couple of touchdowns off of that. So the 49ers offensive line did an amazing job in this game creating holes for Mostert, and he exploited this Packers defense. Jimmy Garoppolo only threw the ball 8 times in this game for 77 yards. So it was a very Ryan Tannehill-esque performance. But even though he only threw the ball 8 times, he did still make a couple of key throws late to kind of run the clock out and secure the victory. One of them was to George Kittle, who only had 1 catch in this game for 19 yards. But the thing about George Kittle is just how amazing of a blocker he is on the outside. It is truly like having another tackle out there when George Kittle is blocking. The dude was blocking Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith. He blocked Blake Martinez a couple of times. I mean, these are Preston Smith is going to the Pro Bowl, and it's like, he's blocking these very high caliber players and pass rushers, and he's blocking them just as well as any tackle is doing in the NFL. And it's an absolutely amazing asset to have if you're the 49ers, to have a guy who's so fast and so physical and can catch the ball just as good as any tight end in the league and can also block like an offensive lineman. He's just such a versatile weapon. One thing that I really like that the 49ers did in this game, and they've been doing throughout the season, is how they use their fullback, Kyle Juszczyk. They use him so effectively in the lead blocking game. I think he got the ball a couple of times too in this game, but he's just so effective blocking in front of Mostert and Coleman, who went down with an injury in one of his carries in this game. But just that lead blocker, when he hits the hole, you have Juszczyk in front of the running back. He can clear out that linebacker, and it just really, really helps that running back hit the second level. And this is something that I hope Coach Nagy is looking at, because I really hope that the Bears start using a fullback next year. We used to use one in the Lovie Smith days, and I think it always helped our run game be more effective. And especially how abysmal the Bears' offensive line this year, we saw that, it seemed like every running play, there was just one guy messing up. There was one block not being made. And I think that if you have a fullback in this situation, even if your guy does mess up, the fullback can kind of take care of that block. So I think the fullback really helps kind of cover up some issues, and it really, really helps that running back hit the second level. So I hope that the Bears implement a fullback next year. Juszczyk is the best one in the game. Their fullbacks aren't used as much as they used to be in the NFL, but I think that it's something the Bears should bring back to kind of get that hard-nosed smash mouth football back in Chicago. The 49ers defense had another very good game. They did give up 20 points in the second half, and they gave up 2 plays over 40 yards in this half as well. So there's a couple things they need to clean up, a couple of big plays that they allowed, but they were up by 27 points at half, so it's kind of hard to stay fully locked in the whole game when your team's up by so much. But a couple of things they need to clean up, the big plays, and you don't want to give up 20 points and a half, especially when you had a shutout going in the first half. The defense was getting really good pressure on Rodgers all game. They generated 3 sacks, and they also were able to force turnovers on Rodgers. So they forced one of them was a forced fumble. They ran a cornerback blitz, and they forced a fumble, but the Packers recovered. And the other fumble that Rodgers had, he just simply dropped the ball in the snap. The Packers were driving. It kind of seemed like a drive that they could get back into the game. I believe it was 20-0 at this point, but they were at the 25, definitely in field goal range, trying to get a touchdown, and Rodgers just simply dropped the snap. The 49ers recovered, and that really seemed like the point where the game was kind of over. That was kind of their chance to get back in the game. And when your best player makes a mistake like that, it just feels like there's no way you're going to win that game. And the thing that impressed me the most about the 49ers, which this is really going to help them against the Chiefs, is their ability to open field tackle. Because, man, can their cornerbacks tackle. And there was at least 2 or 3 plays. The Packers are so great at running screen plays. They either just flick it to Adams or Lazar and Adams blocks. And they're just great at doing these 2-yard screen plays. The guy takes it upfield for 8 yards. And, it puts you in a great second and short. But the 49ers were really stopping the Packers on these plays. They did a great job of open field tackling, and they're going to have to keep that up against the Chiefs, because if you allow the Chiefs to get yards after the catch, they will destroy you. That is what they make their living out of. Mahomes doesn't even have to throw the ball downfield. He can just throw the ball 7-8 yards down the field, and Tyreek Hill will take it 40 yards. So the 49ers are going to have to be just as good as open field tackling in the Super Bowl if they want to stop the Kansas City offense, but they really put on a clinic on how to tackle in this game, and it was pretty impressive to watch. So Rodgers in this game was 31 for 39 for 326 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And these numbers definitely do not reflect of how poor of a performance he's had, especially in the first half. I hate Aaron Rodgers. I don't want to say hate, that's a strong word, but I dislike him because of how big of a Bears fan I am. But the dude was bad in the first half, and that's not me watching it as a Bears fan. Any guy would say that he played bad in the first half. He had 3 turnovers in the first half, 2 of which were extremely, 2 turnovers. He had another one that the Packers recovered, but he had an interception inside his own 30-yard line, which set up a 49ers score. And he also had that fumble that I said that stopped a drive, a really promising drive for the Packers. So he did not help his team out at all in the first half. And it really, they had no chance of beating the 49ers unless he was playing at an absolute elite level. Rodgers also threw a pick. His last pick came in the fourth quarter on a deep bomb to Davante Adams that was picked off by Richard Sherman. So this pick doesn't really count. He's kind of just going for a Hail Mary play in the situation, trying to somehow bring some life back. But he threw it into double coverage to Davante Adams. It ended up getting picked off by Richard Sherman, and that was the final note in the game. The Packers offense really had nothing going in the first half. Rodgers only had 65 passing yards on 9 attempts, and they only had 51 rushing yards at half. And it was really interesting because his completion percentage was so high in the first half, and even in the game, 31 for 39 is a pretty darn good completion percentage. But Rodgers, I think, was 8 for 9 at one point, and it was like 8 for 9, but for 50 yards. So, you're completing a lot of passes, but your offense isn't really doing anything with that. And that is exactly what I was talking about with the 49ers open field tackling, because a lot of his completions were 2 to 3 yard screen passes or little dump offs over the middle that the 49ers were not allowing the Packers turn into big games. Because when you allow a team like that to get first downs and 10, 15 yards on a play where it should only go 3 to 4 yards, that's just how you completely kill your defense and you allow the opposing team offense to get into a rhythm. So the 49ers did a great job of not allowing these small plays to turn into big ones. The flip side of this was the 49ers offense in the first half. They had 185 rushing yards at half, with Mostert having 3 touchdowns. So one offense in Green Bay's couldn't really get anything going. They only had 115 yards in the first half. And then you can compare that to the 185 rushing yards that the 49ers have. And that basically, that was all she wrote. It was pretty funny because the Packers really thought that they had a solid run defense with Preston Smith and JoeDaBears Smith, but obviously not. And my main takeaway for the Packers in this game is that they desperately need a nose tackle who can plug the middle. They haven't really had a really good nose tackle since B.J. Raji. And it was evident in this game that they got to have someone to plug the middle. And, Preston and JoeDaBears Smith are both very good players on the outside, but this entire game, the 49ers just ran it right at them, and they had no answer for it. They would have Kittle blocking on the outside, and then they would have Juszczyk in front of the running back, and the edges couldn't contain it all in this game. So they're going to have to beef up their defensive line a little bit more, get someone to stop the middle, or teams are going to see that if the 49ers can run the ball like this, this could be a formula that teams try to use against the Packers. So now we get to the fun part, the Super Bowl preview, and honestly at this point, I have no idea who to pick for this game, and normally I'm pretty good at kind of knowing who I think will win. I picked these 2 games correctly. I thought the 49ers would win, and even though I wanted the Titans to win, if I had to put money on the AFC Championship, I would have put it on the Kansas City Chiefs. But this game, it's going to be one hell of a game. You have arguably the best offense in the league in Kansas City going up against arguably the best defense in the league. I think currently the best pass rush in the league with how dominant the 49ers front 4 is. And it's going to be pretty amazing to see. We got to see if the 49ers defense can stop the weapons of the Kansas City offense. But I think that they should. I think that the 49ers have the unit to do that. And that is because, as I said earlier, how they're able to get pressure by only rushing 4. That really frees up their secondary to play, tighter coverage, double some people, and still get pressure on Mahomes. So, the 49ers, they got Richard Sherman in the back end. So let's see if he's back in the Super Bowl. Let's see if he can make a couple of big plays. So it's gonna be a great game. Strength against strength, and the 49ers offense is no joke either. We saw in this game how well they can run the ball. So if the Chiefs allow them to run the ball like this in this game, they're gonna have no chance of winning You know, the 49ers can kind of try to do what the Titans did maybe a little bit, just kind of run the ball, control the clock. But obviously, Jimmy Garoppolo is a better quarterback than Ryan Tannehill. So if they need Jimmy G to step up and throw the ball and make some big throws to Emmanuel Sanders or George Kittle, he definitely can do that. So I guess if I had to pick, me personally, I'm rooting for the 49ers. I would not be mad if the Chiefs won. Don't get me wrong about that. I would love to see Andy Reid win his first championship. The dude's a Hall of Fame coach. So many great coaches have come from him. And, you know, I'd feel really good for the guy if he won. But I think in my heart, I'm rooting for the 49ers. I just think how they came from only 4 wins last year. They had the number 2 overall pick. They get Nick Bosa. He transforms their defensive line. And all of a sudden, they're back in the Super Bowl. It's a great story. I like Jimmy G. So I'm definitely rooting for the 49ers, but I'm really trying to figure out who I would pick for this game. And it seems like such a toss-up. It's hard to root or to bet against the Chiefs' offense with how powerful they can be. But it's also hard to bet against that 49ers defense and how we saw in the first half of this game just how smothering their defensive line and secondary can be. So I'm not going to make a prediction on the show. I'll let y'all know that I'm rooting for the 49ers, and I'm mainly just rooting for an amazing game. We've had some pretty good Super Bowls these past couple of years. Last year's was pretty boring with the, I think it was a 10-3 or 10-6 Patriots win. It was a pretty boring Super Bowl, but I think this one's definitely going to be more high scoring. I'm not going to pick who's going to win the game at the end, but I think the score is going to be somewhere around like 27-24. It couldn't even be 34-31. I think it's going to be decently high scoring, and it's going to come down to what team. It might come down to what team has the ball last or what team can make that big play at the end. So it's going to be a heck of a game. I can't wait to watch it, and it should be really good for the NFL. So thank you all for listening to the JoeDaBears Football Show. We'll be back in 2 weeks with the Super Bowl analysis. We have a break next weekend after our January turn, but we'll be back in 2 weeks after the Super Bowl. We'll break it down for you. It should be a great game, and then we get into get into the fun of the off season with the draft. We'll have free agency, see who the Bears let go, see who the Bears pick up, and we also get into more other sports. We'll get into basketball, March Madness for sure. We love watching March Madness. Baseball will be around the corner in April, so we'll keep it all interesting. And it should make for a good spring. So thank you all for listening. Hope you all enjoy the Super Bowl, and see you guys in a couple of weeks.